Alrighty, guys, let's talk about the newest MCU movie, Thunderbolts, asterisk. And we'll talk about that asterisk in the spoiler review. But before we get into that, this is going to be a non-spoiler reaction to Thunderbolts, the newest MCU film. So, non-spoiler review, I should say, of Thunderbolts. And normally I do these reviews, non-spoiler and spoiler together. And that's primarily because I try to watch the movies the day they come out, so usually the Friday, and then we try to post the reviews for the upcoming podcast, which comes out on Saturday. So kind of a quick turnaround, and I want to be able to put the reviews out pretty quickly, and so they're usually put together. But this time I was able to see Thunderbolts on the Thursday, and so I am able to split them out. So I'm going to talk about Thunderbolts in a non-spoiler segment and put that on the channel, so that hopefully if you guys haven't seen Thunderbolts, you can check out my non-spoiler review, and then a day later hopefully we'll release our spoiler segment, or it can be all heard on the podcast that comes out on Saturday morning. Anyways, all that aside, this is going to be completely non-spoiler, and then we will definitely get into the spoiler segment later on, and I'll of course be talking about the post-credit scenes in that segment, but also in a separate segment as well. So Thunderbolts is the MCU movie that, yes, people have been saying, kind of like the MCU Suicide Squad, or, just the group of anti-heroes, like the group of heroes that didn't really fit together, and are they heroes, are they villains, are they good people, are they not good people, but a lot of interesting personalities coming to the table to face a threat. And if you haven't seen the trailers, then, well, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about what's in the trailers, but obviously not too much further than that. And even then, I'm going to be a little bit vague because there's some interesting stuff in this movie. But they're coming together to face a threat, a very shadowy threat that is looming over New York City under some kind of duress, and Valentina is part of this somehow, and a lot of interesting things going on. So that's the context around Thunderbolts. I had always said, and the trailers, I like the trailers, but even aside from the trailers, I always said that this movie had just so much potential because of the cast and the way that the film is being presented. It's not like the film, this kind of thing hasn't been done before. A group of misfits, a group of ragtag anti-heroes, villains being put together in an interesting situation. Even DC has done this many times before with Suicide Squad, a couple times. So again, this is not anything inherently new, but I just think that the kinds of personalities that they put together, also world-class talent, Sebastian Stan and Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh is incredible. I mean, not just, Thunderbolts, but just in general, she's incredible. And I think that putting together a really interesting roster also of Ghost and Taskmaster and U.S. Agent and Red Guardian, Bucky, Yelena, and then mixing all of them with the sort of lingering building subplot of, Valentina being a part of the film as well. Again, it's a recipe that I think, I think it has a lot of potential for success, right? That's what I was thinking before the film came out. And I also think that the way that they were just presenting the film, and yeah, I think the trailers, just the chemistry between the team and some of the things that we were seeing in the trailer. Again, not to spoil anything, it's in the trailers, but there's an interesting character named Bob who's in the movie, and he becomes I won't spoil it, but he becomes an interesting component to the film in very unique and interesting ways. So there's all of that going for it. So I watched Thunderbolts, and here's what I will say. I don't think Thunderbolts is perfect. I don't think that I walked out of Thunderbolts, with the same euphoric kind of feeling of an Avengers Endgame, an Avengers Infinity War. Euphoric is maybe the wrong word for that kind of movie. SpiderMan No Way Home. This movie's different, though. This movie's different, right? Because I came out of it saying Thunderbolts is not just superhero movie good. And I say that to say that while I love Avengers Endgame, and while I love Spider-Man No Way Home, you point to things in those two films that are so unique to a personal experience, as in, oh, I grew up watching all the Spider-Man movies. I love all the Spider-Man. I love Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire and all of those characters. And I loved the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home. In Avengers Endgame, you come out of Avengers Endgame saying, oh, I grew up an MCU fan and I love the MCU and everything that it brought to me as a kid and growing up with it and watching all the films. And this is the culmination. I love Endgame. Those are, in my opinion, two films that are also just good movies, but the experiences that you come out of those two movies with are very specific to the, just being a fan, right? And I think Thunderbolts, right, rewards you as an MCU fan. But I came out of Thunderbolts saying, this is a good movie. It's a really good movie. And the things that I was thinking about after Thunderbolts had very little to do with superhero anything, and actually had more to do with just life. This movie is deep. This movie is emotional. The ending of the movie had me close to tears. It is profound, actually, what they were able to do at the at the conclusion of the movie. Right, throughout the movie, they're setting up all these things, and it comes to a head at the end of Thunderbolts, and it's really wonderful. It's beautiful, and it's different for an MCU movie. Now, again, I said Thunderbolts isn't perfect in my opinion. I think the first half of Thunderbolts, I actually put a post out on my YouTube channel before the podcast comes out to say that, yeah, I mean, I don't think Thunderbolts is perfect because I think the first half of the movie, honestly, is a little bit slow and it takes its time to get going. And I think that, this movie is over 2 hours long, I believe. So it's not like, objectively the movie is a short movie, a short film, right? But I think that when you get to the second act, there's a point in the movie where it's like, oh, you finally feel like the movie is kicking into gear. And then you suddenly realize that the movie's halfway over, basically. And by the time, I think the second act honestly suffered a lot from that. Because the first act is fun. And the first act has a lot of interesting things. We're getting introduced to the characters again and introduced to them as a team together and all that setup. And you see their chemistry, for the first time and then see how it develops. All that is really fun, really enjoyable. But again, it kind of takes a while to get going because they're introducing a lot of these different things. And then you get to the second act and the second act just kind of zips by. And all of a sudden you're in the third act. And like I said, the third act of the movie is phenomenal. Like the last 30 to 45 minutes of this movie, I think really do rank amongst the top of the MCU. And again, it's not for those same reasons. It's not similar to Endgame or No Way Home, but it's like a Black Panther Wakanda Forever, for example, which even then is rooted very much in real world trauma and real world grief. But even still, I love the ending of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But, I think that the ending of Thunderbolts is just, it's beautiful. It's beautifully done. I just think that, by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, we're already here. And then you get to the end and it starts to go and it starts to ramp up towards the finale. And you're like, oh my goodness, I see. I get it now. So, it's not like anything inherently was bad. It's not like I'm saying, oh, the second act was terrible. The first act was terrible. And it made the third act look so much better in comparison. Nothing like that. Standouts are obviously Florence Pugh. I think that Florence Pugh does a phenomenal job. David Harbour is so funny, as always. The rest of the cast. I think that Ghost, Taskmaster, and U.S. Agent were kind of relegated to side roles, to be honest with you. I think that they didn't, the three of them, not that necessarily they didn't have a lot of screen time or screen presence, but I just think that what their roles were not as interesting as the other characters. Bucky was interesting. I think he had a couple nice moments, but it's not like he, in my opinion at least, it's not like he stole many scenes in the movie. He was there, and he was there as a very, it was understandable why he was a part of this team. It's not like you were like, why is Bucky in this? No, nothing like that at all. But I think that really the standouts on the Thunderbolts were Florence Pugh just carrying emotionally and screen presence and everything like that. She was just awesome, and David Harbour is just so funny. I mean, he's such a great character, but he also has some really kind and emotional moments in there as well, which I loved. And then we'll talk about Lewis Pullman as Bob. And I really think that there are, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but Lewis Pullman, sorry, I almost called him Bob. Lewis Pullman gives a very wonderful performance. I won't talk about it because I just, for those of you who don't know what happens in the movie and haven't seen the trailers and don't really know, the character of Bob is a very complicated character. And Lewis Pullman is able to pull off that kind of duality and multidimensionality really, really well. And I really enjoyed that. Other parts of the movie, like Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Val and some other supporting characters, they're fine. They're in the movie and they're fine. I think that the film does what it needs to do with characters like that. But I think for the most part, you're really carried by Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Lewis Pullman, in my opinion, are the standouts of the movie. Action is really good. I think that some of the action is, nothing, you're not going to come out of Thunderbolts being like, wow, the next Winter Soldier in terms of action, but I really like how scrappy these characters are. I really like the fact that these characters are fighting hand to hand, and the combat is really gritty, and when they're fighting, it's on the ground. No one's shooting, magic lightning out of the sky with a hammer, nothing like that. It's very gritty, and guns and shields and punches and things like that. It's tactical, which I think is a fun thing. But look, guys, I mean, as I wrap up the non-spoiler review, what stands out to me about Thunderbolts is not really any of that. It's really the heart that's at the center of this movie. There's a beating heart at the center of the film that really, like I said, when you walk out of the movie, when I walked out of this movie, I wasn't really thinking about the action or the punches or how this fits into the MCU and all those kinds of things. I was so impressed with how the film handled its emotional beats and how it was able to tell a story that sank deeper into my core than an MCU film has been able to do, and even many films have been able to do over the last few months. And I've been so impressed by that. So I really enjoyed Thunderbolts. Again, not a perfect movie, but one that is super memorable, especially by the ending. And I think it's a very exciting thing to see these group of characters. And we know, for those of you who have seen the Avengers Doomsday cast announcement, we know that a lot of them will be returning for Avengers Doomsday. But it's still very exciting to see them in this film and see, hope for a great future for these characters in Avengers Doomsday and beyond. So guys, what do you think about Thunderbolts? Have you seen it, and did you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments down below.